Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to our guests and speakers to this enriching fireside chat on tracing the Gupta Shrines of Madhya Pradesh. I am Janhavi from Vincent Graphics, the PR team of the department. Let me now introduce you to our brand ambassador, Vakan Dada. Let me now introduce you to our brand ambassador, Vakan Dada, inspired by the renowned archaeologist Dr. Vishnu Vakankar, who discovered the Bhimbetka rock shelters in 1957. He symbolizes the department's commitment to heritage awareness. The Directorate of Archaeology, Archives and Museums, Madhya Pradesh, has a wealth of historical assets and heritage. Through these sessions, we aim to initiate insightful and engaging discussions with subject experts. We also strive to create authentic content which is made available through our website, YouTube, Reels, media coverage and limited circulation of white papers. Today's session will proceed as follows. A keynote address by the Joint Director, Dr. Manisha Sharma, followed by the fireside chat, then a dialogue and question-answer session, and concluding remarks by Dr. Manisha Sharma. I would now like to welcome Dr. Manisha Sharma, Joint Director of the Directorate of Archaeology, Archives and Museums, Madhya Pradesh, and the Director of the Dr. Vishnu Vakankar Archaeological Research Institute. Dr. Sharma is a distinguished academician and administrator with over 2 decades of experience in higher education and heritage management. She has served for more than 23 years as a teacher, head of department, and researcher. She successfully led 51 vocational courses recognized by the UGC and other national bodies and has held several key roles within Madhya Pradesh's higher education department. She is currently active in archaeological research, preservation and museum development. In addition to her academic work, Dr. Sharma is also an accomplished anchor, scriptwriter and oil painting artist. A warm welcome to you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janhavi. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Kurush sir, Shivam, and everyone who is online. Really a moment of great pleasure that you are available with us, and this platform is providing this opportunity to talk, to discuss, to make aware all audience about the golden aspect of our history and heritage. It's a great thing that I am associated with this directorate, this department, because I belong to history. So it's a very grateful moment also, and I am fortunate one that I am associated with this heritage aspect of our life, because I will always say that it's related to our existence. If we are not familiar with our roots, with our heritage, then we can't understand our existence, our depth. And India, especially Madhya Pradesh, is very rich in this aspect. So to organize such program in webinar format, it's very relevant, as well as it's very important to convey all these aspects which are actually golden in that sense, to make aware our new generation. So I welcome you, and I hope that such program, this program and such other programs will be organized, and more people will join such programs. So thank you very much, and Kurush sir, I hope you will enjoy this platform. Thank you.
Sure, it's always a joy to be associated with the
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your kind words and support. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Kurush Dalal, archaeologist, culinary anthropologist, historian, and museum consultant. Dr. Dalal holds a master's in archaeology and a PhD on the early Iron Age in Rajasthan both from Vakan College and Pune University. His later work focused on early medieval archaeology with significant excavations at Sanjan, Chandur and Mandar. He is the co-director of the Fireside exploration projects documenting the archaeology of Mumbai since 2015. His research areas include numismatics, defense archaeology, architecture, ethno-archaeology. Dr. Dalal has published 7 edited volumes, 44 academic papers, and has taught at the University of Mumbai for nearly a decade. He was a consulting editor at Live History India. From 2020 to 2024, he headed the School of Archaeology at Institution and currently leads Gyan Factory, Mumbai. Dr. Dalal has been actively conducting lectures on food and archaeology and culinary anthropology since 2019. He co-runs the Studying Food workshop with Ms. Reha Mitra Dalal, CEO, Shelf Puratatva Solutions, Bhopal. Mr. Dube is a dedicated PhD researcher at Nagpur University, specializing in ancient Indian culture and iconography, particularly of the cultures in central India. He has worked extensively across 18 districts of Madhya Pradesh, with key fieldwork at Tripuri, Bakswara and Devgarh, and notable documentation at Tadoba Andhari, Pandavgarh and Raisen. His excavation work at Bandhavgarh was globally recognized among the top 10 discoveries by Heritage Daily. Mr. Dube has presented over 25 papers, authored 19 publications, and written 11 books and booklets. He has collaborated with ASI, IASI, Tribal Museum Bhopal, and platforms like the G20 Summit and Heritage Pathshala to promote heritage awareness. A warm welcome to both our speakers. I would now like to open the session, the fireside chat, a dialogue between Dr. Kurush Dalal and Mr. Shivam Dube as they explore the art and architecture of the shrines of Gupta period in Madhya Pradesh. Over to our speakers.
Thank you, Janhavi. And since Kurush sir have been my mentor, my guide from past 12 years, and I'll take like opportunity to say thanks to him that because of him I got introduced in proper field archaeology. So today we are going to discuss about Gupta architecture, because when we talk about Gupta architecture, when we read about Gupta architecture, it is something which is very prominent and very important aspect of archaeology and heritage and history. So Guptas are some of the very early dynasty. They have contributed a lot in art, architecture, iconography, and like in field of numismatics. So today, the fireside chat will start with the very first question from Dr. Dalal sir, and that is, what is Gupta art?
So this is probably one of the most dangerous questions to answer, because Gupta art is so many things that we could perhaps talk about Gupta art for hours and hours and still argue about exactly what it means. To be very brief, because there are time constraints here, let me put it this way to you, that the depictions and the art that we see today in India are to a large extent what we see thanks to the Bactrian Greeks, the Indo-Greeks and the Mathura school. The Mathura school, which is perhaps the first real Indian at the kind of sculptural and structural art that we see elsewhere, is something that has incredibly complex characteristics thanks to following only the literary traditions of Buddhism, describing its iconography. It takes some time for the art of the Mathura school to really ascertain itself in the Kushana period, and it is only when it goes into the Gupta period that this art style, this Mathura art style, truly transcends its origins and achieves its status. It becomes something, it becomes the sum of all things that are available to it. And what happens at this point is that you see a beautiful synthesis of certain Bactrian traditions, or Greek traditions as we like to call them, with Shaka influences, on top of which we have Kushana influences. We see the Indic idiom which has surfaced by itself, and we see all of these coming together in what surprisingly becomes a seamlessly beautiful tradition. The first true temples of India that we have belong to the Gupta era. The first serious art in the subcontinent, which is not of Greek inspired origins or Kushana inspired origins, once again is truly Gupta art.
So you're trying to, I'm sorry sir, but also you're trying to say that Guptas are the dynasty which took like various aspects from the previous dynasties and they like combined it and generated a newer form of the art. So there's the second question, why many of the art historians and iconographists call Gupta art as like what you can say, they call it more indigenous art than what you can say than like a conflicts of different form of arts.
There's always been art in India, sure. And art in India goes back to the prehistoric and proto-historic period. So there's no denying the fact that India has an incredibly long tradition of art. That said, what we have to understand is that Indian art has gone through very, very strong phases. It is in the Gupta period that all of these experiments in Indian art, if you like to call them that, all truly mature. All of these experiences truly mature during this period. And this is what gives Gupta art its identity.
Okay, so like when we talk about art, there is a concept. I feel like we all talk about school of arts. Like there is a art, then there is a school of art. Like in Gupta's, we know about Mathura School of Art and Sarnath School of Art. There's like plenty of. So can you elaborate how a school of art is established?
This is again a clear answer to your question, Shivam. But to put it in a tighter box, a school of art has 3 or 4 important characteristics. The first is its location. The second is the quality that exists at the space. The third is the patronage that these artists are getting. And the fourth and perhaps the most important is the people who are actually creating the art, the artisans that we have. So the artisans make a huge role in this. It is the artisans who come together along with their patrons to actually give their patrons something which wows their patrons and makes their patrons keep coming back. So there are centers that emerge of power, and along with these centers of power emerge centers of art.
So can we add one more point in the same? It's like the role of raw material in the School of Arts, because when we see the School of Arts, especially the Gupta School of Arts, the most number of temples in Madhya Pradesh as Nanchand is there, which is state protected monument, and Tigua, Bhumra, and then Devgarh, then Mathura, Sachi. So when we see these places as one of the finest quality of sandstones, quartzite sandstones, like fine grain sandstone, which is very easy to carve and very like very ideal for the artisans. So is there any chance that these raw materials have also contributed in establishment of a certain like school of art or artistic like this thing examples at certain places, or it's just like raw materials doesn't matter?
So raw materials are very important to not just every school of art, but every period of art. And raw materials, as you know, Shivam, are directly related to the geography and the geology of the area. So availability is a very big factor. The fact that we know that most of our Indo-Greek art comes to us in schist is because schist is the number one usable rock available to them. So much beautiful Mauryan art comes to us in Chunar sandstone, which allows the Mauryan artisans to give it that polish. The Kushana artisans prefer the white flecked red sandstone, the so-called Mathura sandstone, to create clay works. So it is in that, keeping in that same way, that the Gupta artisans choose a finer, more homogeneous variant of the same sandstone. So they don't any longer want the imperfections of the white spots and the small holes that turn up in the larger, darker red sandstone. They're looking at a lighter, sandier colored sandstone. And the main reason for sandstone is very simple. They are looking at something which they can carve intricate details into. So, in the Gupta period, the Sanghati of the Buddha, when you look at Buddha images, shows a transparent cloth, a malmal cloth covering the body of the Buddha, where you can barely see the cloth. If you look at the corresponding imagery from the Indo-Greek schools or the earlier Kushan schools in the Gandhara region, the folds of the cloth are very thick floating across the body. Here it is very obviously the highest quality of cotton, the malmal cotton, which is being portrayed as being worn by the Buddha. And it is almost transparent. You can see the body of the Buddha through the cloth. Now to get this degree of fineness, number one, and the nimbus behind the Buddha, to get that kind of intricate carving, which is the hallmark of the Gupta school, you have to have a softer, more delicate, fine-grained rock, without which you just cannot achieve this kind of perfection. So yes, the choice of raw material plays a very big role in the finesse and the fineness of Gupta art.
Yeah, exactly. And this is Vidar now, I think that is that we start finding structure in terracotta temples rather than stone ones. So we can actually, because in that Ganga Doab region, we find fine grain of fine quality of what you can say soil. So like 40.
I think we've lost Shivam briefly, but to carry on with Shivam's question, the fact remains that this area of Madhya Pradesh has a beautiful exposure of sandstones, and these sandstones make for relatively easier work than say granites or schists, or say maybe not schists, but say granites and basalts and things like that. So the availability of sandstone is one of the major reasons why the Gupta era structures are made out of stone blocks in Madhya Pradesh, whereas the few temples that we have in Uttar Pradesh are made out of bricks. Bricks are the easier option in the Ganga Valley, where there is absolutely no dearth of fine clay, fine silty clay, and the brickmaking tradition in the Ganga Valley go back, to the beautiful walls of Ujjain and the walls of the fortified cities that we have in the second urbanization, right from the 7th, 8th century AD onwards. The beautiful walls of Kaushambi, that fabulous image of that man standing on the slightly stepped wall, reaching out, some 40 feet at the Kaushambi excavations in the ASI IR report, is one of those iconic pictures which no archaeologist can kind of overlook. So yes, most definitely, brick was an easier accessible medium when it came to the Ganga Valley. But on the other hand, stone, fine-grained, softer stone was easily available for carving in Madhya Pradesh. And therefore Madhya Pradesh sees this vast variety of beautiful uh, Gupta shrines in stone. And almost all of these shrines fall into Madhya Pradesh with the exception of Devgarh. And Dube is barely a kilometer and a half across the border from Madhya Pradesh into Uttar Pradesh. So technically, as far as I am concerned, it is part of the same cluster. So even Dube, along with Dhumara and Nachna and Sanchi and all of those other caves, is kind of matter of factly just one and the same as that entire set of beautiful temples that we have from Madhya Pradesh. And it's a very interesting development. The Madhya Pradesh temple
Exactly.
is a very simple structure. It has a flat roof, it has a border on the roof, it has very, very plain walls on both sides and the back. It is mainly the front that is ornamented. Two pilasters, two pillars, a short veranda, and then the Garbhagriha behind it. Usually on a large sandstone plinth. That is the base layout of temple architecture, and that is basically, as we call Sanchi 17, the beginning of all stone temple architecture in India. Is Shivam back with us?
I'm sorry, we got power cut. I'm so sorry. So here's the another question which comes to from your field of expertise, and that is why Gupta art is called as golden era of Indian art.
So there are two ways to answer this, Shiva. The first, of course, is because we have some absolutely fabulous gold coinage of the Guptas, and the gold coinage of the Guptas is so in your face that there is just no two ways that you can ignore it. Yes, we have Kushana gold coins and we have Bactrian Greek gold coins, etc. But the gold coins of the Guptas, the sheer variety of Samudragupta's coins and then Chandragupta II's coins just stand out. Most people don't realize that these coins were not common circulation. These coins were very high value notes. They were like, 10,000 rupee notes would be today or 15,000 rupee notes would be today. You don't go out to buy tomatoes with them. So there was a secondary coinage all throughout Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh and Bihar and that entire region of northern India, which was essentially copper coinage. There was silver coinage by the Guptas after Chandragupta II invaded Gujarat and realized that copper coinage of the Guptas was not acceptable to the local people. So for continuity's sake, the same kind of Shatrava coins, but now minted by the Guptas, were minted in Gujarat. But it's the gold coins that stand out and absolutely shock you about this amazing intricacy, the detail, the kind of structure, and very often the gold coins tell you things where you have to read between the lines. Chandragupta II's image of the lion slayer is essentially making a very clear point about the invasion of Gujarat and the subjugation of Gujarat. Kumaragupta's rhinoceros slayer coin is telling you that Kumaragupta has now established himself in Assam. So there is much to read between the lines. Samudragupta's famous Ashwamedha coin, probably the first great Ashwamedha coin ever issued in India, and I would say the greatest Ashwamedha coins ever issued. These were commemorative. These were not for large-scale circulation. But as Mr. Gupta has this amazing book called Treasures of the Gupta Empire by Sanjeev Kumar. And for anybody who wants to look at the fabulous treasures that are Gupta gold coins, Sanjeev Kumar's book is absolutely the final word. That's part one. Part two, and this is where the story gets a little more interesting, and that is that till then, a lot of Indian art is either terracotta art, is small scale art. There's very little large scale art, with the exception of perhaps the Lohanipur torso and the Didarganj Yakshini. We don't really have monumental art. We have the pillars, no doubt about them. We have the caves of the Barabar Hills, but we don't really have any monumental art coming to us from the Mauryan period. In the Shunga period, we have a large amount of terracotta art. But it is truly in the Gupta period that we see this art kind of crystallize into the beginnings of the temples and the kind of sculptures that we are going to see for the next 1,000 years. So that to me is more of a reason why the Gupta age is a golden age of art. It's a golden age of literature. I mean, we have Kalidasa. We have the fact that the entire Vakataka Empire becomes a co-ruling state along with the Guptas thanks to the marriage of Prabhavati Gupta. And Kalidasa writes most of his greatest works in Maharashtra. So the greatest Sanskrit works of the golden age are written in Maharashtra, Ramtek. So this tells you about the kind of hold that the Guptas have. You see, we tend to make a mistake very often when we think of the Guptas as a very northern empire. The Guptas are a very central empire. It is the heart of India that is controlled by the Guptas. And in this, again, are the seeds of why it is a golden age.
Yeah, exactly. So when we reach in central part of India, so like every lecture I think needs to have something, some questions which is out of the box.
Shivam, just a minute. Shivam. Janhavi, can I interview?
Please, ma'am.
Sir, I am very much enjoying your lecture, and I wanted to ask that I wanted to know your comment on Kala, Bhav and Saundarya, because I love these words and their expressions in Gupta art. Actually, this word intricate carving, in physical features, we can say that intricate carving or refinement is the key feature of Gupta art, and in expression. So I would like to know about artistic and aesthetic and emotional expression part, please.
So, ma'am, this is again, this is an entire series of lectures, but let me try and put this in a nutshell, and forgive me if I don't do a very good job. But the beginnings of Indian aesthetics as a theory are seen in the little nuances that we see in art. I mean, Abhinav Gupta comes in much later, probably around the 7th century AD, and we have Bharata Muni writing the Natya Shastra in the 8th, 9th century, and these are all post-Gupta phenomena. But it is in the Gupta period that Bhav and Saundarya are deeply linked to Kala. And this is where the roots of Indian aesthetics lie. So if you want to trace the journey that Abhinav Gupta and Bharat Muni coalesce at the end of this period, then the beginnings of that story are in the Gupta era. Because you are not looking at static imagery. A lot of imagery, even if it is narrative, in the earlier traditions is very static. There is no elasticity, there is no plasticity. Yes, they are very beautiful images, but it's it and that's that. When you start seeing the images of the Gupta period onwards, you see an enormous amount of, I mean, Kala for sure, enormous amount of art, there's no doubt about that. But there is a lot of vision in the imagery itself. There is a lot of inherent beauty, there is nuance, and there are different emotions that are being portrayed. So when you look at the Buddha images, for example, the kind of emotions that you see coming through the Buddha, the quiet peace, the love, the happiness, all of these are the bedrock of what man later becomes the Navarasas. So beauty in the form of all the carvings that we see, all the deities that we see, some of the earliest representations of Vishnu that we see at Dube, which as I said to me is empty because it's less than 2 kilometers across the border. It's part of that same group of temples. And the kind of the temple details, the capitals that we start seeing at Bhumara, and that absolutely gorgeous Bhumara Ekamukha Shivali that we have. I mean, the sheer majesty of that face of Shivam, that Shivali, the details in his locks, the details of his jewelry. I mean, it's just a bust in what is medium relief actually on there, but it looks to you as though it is in deep relief. And when you look at it carefully, start seeing actually within it a, this, it is almost as though there is a continuation of Buddhism when you look at the Bhumara temple, Bharkuleshwar temple, as it's called, the Shiva image. You see the same face looking down. There's a slight tilt. The eyes, which are by Agnostian called the almond eyes, half closed. The three bands across the neck, the Urma mark in the middle of the head. All of that is being borrowed right from Buddhism and transferred beautifully into Hinduism. So the Hinduism that will coalesce in the 8th, 9th century AD, you're seeing even that ascertaining itself and defining itself in the Gupta era. So all of this is basically the beauty of Gupta art.
Well said, very well expressed. Thank you. Another point is, as a whole, if we see, as a whole, one scene like in Udaigiri in Madhya Pradesh, Varah statue, which has been one relief, one is image of this Navgraha, last, I think, 2-3 days before, on 17th September, our Honorable CM gifted it to Prime Minister also, and he accepted. So it's a very good news for all of us. So as a whole, beauty of in totality, this feature is also, I think, existing in Gupta sculpture or architecture. Balance or refinement, we can say.
Also the majesty. When you look at the beautiful figure of Varaha, that pose, one leg up, one hand on the hip, head turned upwards, that in itself again is it's one of the earliest depictions that we have of these deities in central India. You Naga on whom he is stepping as he steps out of the primordial waters, as he saves the earth from the ocean of chaos. So all of that being put together, and the entire pantheon of the gods spread out to accept the amazing event that has taken place and the amazing feat that has been carried out by none other than Vishnu himself. And Vishnu shown as a warrior, as having battled the cosmic ocean and saved the earth. That is just so apparent in his stance. And it's the prototype perhaps for all the Varaha images that come afterwards. So again, that is a incredibly powerful image. Also, there is that very interesting tiger cave, where the entire front of a cave has been modified into the face of a tiger, and you enter the mouth of the tiger as you enter the cave at Udaigiri. And the tiger cave at Udaigiri, which most people are quite comfortable with calling a Gupta era cave, is again a very, very good idea of what is happening during that period, the kind of discovery that has been made, the kind of exciting changes that are happening. The fact that people are being allowed for the first time, I would say, I mean, I'll probably get screamed at for saying this, but are being allowed to experiment, allowed to be different. It does not have to follow the same laws, the same rules. And that is a very good part of it.
Thank you. Don't you think some words expressed can be expressed in the best form through Gupta art, like refinement, like intricate carving, like aesthetics, aesthetic beauty? Yeah, these are some words which can be expressed in Gupta art. So it's a very, 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 कितना भी कह सकते हैं, we can say electrically on the Gupta art. Please carry on.
True, true. That entire region has been a very strong hotbed, right from the Ashokan material that we get from Sanchi, and that beautiful four-lion capital. Most Indians don't know that there are two four-lion capitals, and one of them is from Sanchi. The famous Bilsa topes, as Cunningham called them, and Shivam has been going, thanks to my requesting him, to some of these really inaccessible points in the Bilsa topes, to some of the most interesting reliquaries of some of the great students and compatriots of the Buddha have been recovered by Cunningham. There is that beautiful Udaygiri Ashokan capital, lion capital, which I think is in Gwalior now, if I remember right, which has a beautiful winged lion on it and a two-humped deer, a two-humped camel on it, telling you that we have continuing traditions of Bactria during the period of the Mauryas and in this region that is extending all the way here. So the fact that this part of Madhya Pradesh is such an important part of the trade routes from the north to the south and across the country is why it is such a hotbed in the Gupta period of such beautiful art. And obviously, a lot of this art is being paid for by various different merchants. And these merchants are capable of paying for this art only because of the trade that is going through this region. So, it's an entire kind of cycle of artisans being encouraged by their patrons, and the patrons being encouraged by the kind of business that is going through. The fact that we believe that it's probably an image of Chandragupta II at the foot of the Varaha, kneeling down and paying his homage to Vishnu himself and including himself quietly into this thing. There is a four-lion capital from Udaygiri, there is a lion capital from Udaygiri. Those never sadly really get.
You are just cutting my question. This is my next question actually. So what is your thought on Guptas? Like, have they followed the concept of Mauryas regarding the pillars and pillar capitals? Because when we see Sanchi and Udaygiri is like barely 12-13 kilometers in a distance, but Sanchi has a Mauryan pillar, and later on Guptas have created a number of more pillars in Sanchi. They have created a number of pillars in Udaygiri. So what was this pillar fight? Because
it's not a pillar fight so much as a celebration.
okay.
I see it as a celebration, not as a fight. I see it as a sense of continuity. So the Guptas are now telling you that they are continuing in the path of Ashoka Maurya. And how can they tell you this? By emulating Ashoka Maurya. So by doing what Ashoka Maurya did, the Guptas are now equating themselves with his legacy and saying they are the legacy keepers and they are taking the legacy ahead. There is that beautiful small rectangular niche at Udaygiri, which has that amazing sculpture of Vishnu with a chakra on one side and a gada on the other. It is a Chaturbuja image with a almost straight mukuta on his head and his scarf around his arms. Look clearly at the chakra. It is not a Sudarshana. It is not a Sudarshana at all. It is not hollow. It is a beautiful chakra sitting on a pillar capital. So when you look at that image, you realize the kind of chakra that is being associated now with Vishnu is the same kind of chakra that we see, the spoke wheel that we see on the gold coins of the Indo-Greeks. The chakra of Vasudeva. But here, it is a chakra on a pillar capital.
Exactly. This is what I wanted to. Yeah, sorry. This is what I wanted to listen. And when we enter in the Madhya Pradesh, so can we call Madhya Pradesh as the hub of Gupta art?
Of surviving Gupta art, yes, Shivam, definitely. There is no two ways about that. We don't know what other Gupta art there might have been in the Ganga Valley. Because a lot of the Ganga Valley art, the Bikagaon brick temple, for example, when it was found was in such terrible condition that what stands today is highly conserved and remade, especially the lower portion. It looked like a cone on both sides. It looked bicone. The bottom had been robbed completely. So imagine if there was one temple that was so elaborate that managed to survive. There must have been beautiful brick temples in the Ganga Valley, and they must have had some absolutely beautiful material with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Temple.
Yes, sir. From your saying only, I remember the very first, what you can say, documented history against Britishers regarding safeguarding and saving of a Gupta shrine in Tigwa, which is in Katni districts of Madhya Pradesh in Bahariban. So the story is very interesting, and we as a people of Central India, or as a people of archaeology, as a people of history, we have forgotten that very incident, and it's only Alexander Cunningham who has written and documented that story. And after that, I don't find anyone who has actually worked on that story or worked on that aspect. I have tried a small survey from near Jabalpur only to find out the bits and pieces of that temple on the railway tracks. And you know why I was searching the railway tracks? Sadly, the small line was removed, and now a bigger line is placed. So I was not able to find much about those members. So can you please elaborate that story, because that is something which we all needs to know.
So the Tigwaha story is like this, that the temple that survives there is a very, very small part of a much larger collapsed complex of temples. And that the British were laying a railway line, and the superintendent over there, the engineering superintendent, was busy pillaging all these blocks, some probably with carvings and things like that, to build the base of the railway line. So the villagers immediately asked the local collector to intervene, and the collector immediately realized what was happening and intervened. But by the time he did that, everything was gone apart from that little bit that is left, that little square temple and that little wall on the side. You know, the beautiful Chamunda image, which is one of the very early Chamunda images that we get in this region. So definitely very, very interesting what was happening there. Alexander Cunningham wrote a very cutting letter. He said that to the gentleman who was in charge, those stones were just ready-made material to be lifted and reused. That tomorrow he would go to the Temple of the Mount, the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, the most important relic of Judaism, and he'd probably consider that also to just be a pile of stones ready for him to use. So to make such a cutting observation, Cunningham was very, very clear about safeguarding Indian heritage in India. And for a man who built the ASI, this is a very, very important moment in archaeology for all our heads of our, departments of archaeology and museums, our departments of state and our central district, to realize that Cunningham's contribution was enormous. I mean, few people know today that the current tree at Bodh Gaya was planted by Cunningham, because the Bodhi that was in place had sickened and was going to die. So Cunningham with his own hands planted the tree that grows there today. So, these kind of things, and this legacy of Cunningham is a very, very important story to be told. The fact that he refused to let the British Museum take away the stupa remains, and that instead they were all shifted to Indian Museum, Calcutta, itself speaks about this man and how highly he thought of it. And the fact that today we are talking about Bodh Gaya and we are changing that board over there and talking about how the local ruler was instrumental in realizing the importance of Bodh Gaya and identifying it and saving it. Okay? The same thing should be done at Tigwa also.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like a part of Archaeological Survey of India for 4 or 5 years. I was working in Tigwa documenting the sculptures and all, like Tigwa, Bhumra, and Nachna, and there's a state protected monument like Nanchand. Nanchand is again a very important archaeological sites, which was later later what you can say conserved by the Bundelas and all, and that is why we find a lot of medieval architecture in that temple. So when we actually trace the complete Gupta stretch, it is like the lower part of Madhya Pradesh, which is like the lower Narmada part, which is very much like dominated by what you can say red sandstone and buff sandstone and all these which we were talking about the materials. That stretch shows the larger picture of Gupta art, and the later dynasties also in that region, either it's Chandelas or it's Pratiharas or it's what you can say Parmaras or Kalachuris, they have actually followed that tradition with a bit of what you can say modifications and all. Now, another question which actually rises over here, you told about trade route. We are obviously trade route was a very prominent space, but there are certain sites where we find Gupta clusters, and those sites are not only related to Gupta period, but their stratigraphy goes till what you can say Mesolithic and Chalcolithic period, like Iran. So was there any aspect of choosing the places? And here I just put a point which I have discussed with you: the stupas and the sites of Mauryans which we find in from Patna to Madhya Pradesh in a line. So is there any?
No, there is no doubt that these are all specifically on trade routes and they're roughly 1 to 2 days apart. All of these trade routes used the important Buddhist shrines originally and then subsequently other shrines as way stations. So every 2 or 3 days march there would be a Buddhist monastery which had been paid for by the traders, where the traders would know that they would get water, rest, a safe place where they could leave things behind for somebody else coming and going. And as royal patronage began to slip in the post-Gupta period from the Buddhist, this became very, very critically important for Buddhism, that the traders now became the supporters of the faith. So all of these shrines that you see, especially the Buddhist shrines, there are Buddhist caves at Dube. Very few people ever talk about those beautiful Buddhist caves that are there just across the border into UP from MP. And it is part of that entire chain heading towards the east. And all of these important monasteries, caves, temples, they can all be plotted virtually in a kind of band running across from MP into Bihar and all the way to Bengal.
So, is there any possibility that the Chaitya Gavaksh which we find prominently in Gupta art are actually taken from the what you can say Chaityas of Buddhist caves?
There is no doubt about it.
There's no.
It is the same arch that continues into the tradition of the Rajputs. It is the same arch that is seen in the beautiful modifications that we see at Uttareshwar temple in the brickwork at Tir. So it is that same arch, that beautiful little Chaitya arch, becomes now a kind of iconic symbol of Indian architecture and design. So there's absolutely no doubt about it. It is no longer a window. It is just a motif.
Dalal sir,
How do you how do you question
I am saying something, Shivam.
yes sir.
okay, Dalal sir, one different question. Is there any role of historiography, or have you find any researches in historiography aspect regarding Gupta art and architecture? Is there any finding that whatever historiography is available by Britishers or by bureaucrats or whatever in British Raj, now we are starting to explore from our point of view, from genuine point of view. So, are you aware, or please enlighten us about that?
So there is an enormous body of work done now by Indians and not by Indians on various aspects of this art. So what we have to understand is that whilst we have a lot of early Europeans doing work in this region, their motives are not necessarily the motives of modern India or independent India. Their motives are very, very obviously colonial motives. They might have been very good people, very honest people and all of that. Yes, no, maybe. But ultimately they were part of a colonial network now. They were definitely looking at their requirements. We need to look at what we see as India and the glory of India as Indians and what it means to us, not so much for the governance of Indians by Europeans, but for the glorification of India by Indians. So yes, there is an enormous amount of work. There is some beautiful work that has been done by Krishna Deva. There is some very good work done by Benjamin Rowland. Percy Brown's work is in its own way very fascinating. I wouldn't call it very colonial. We have some very nice work done by S.P. Gupta in his Roots of Indian Art. And subsequent to that, you have Stella Kramrosch, and her work is also very good. You also have
Agrawal sir.
yes, Agarwal sir, Ashish Agarwal, we have, who's done quite a bit of work, and we also have some very interesting work done by Amananda Ghosh, who is never talked about. We have Mr. Gupta himself, who talks about the iconography and the various aspects of Indian iconography from an iconography point of view. R.S. Gupta, and I find R.S. Gupta's work something that should be part of all curricula because it makes it so much more easy to understand Indian art. If once you get the grip on the iconography, the mudras, the positions, the various different ayuddhas, so on and so forth. So yes, ma'am, there is a lot of work. Do we need more work? Yes. Do we need to start bringing this work together in
more work as well as is there any change we are seeing in that perspective wise?
So let me put it this way, ma'am. After the Bilsa Topes book was written by Alexander Cunningham, though some work was done by Marshall in the same direction, and though Archaeology also did some work at Satara, nobody has come out with a comprehensive view of all the Bilsa Topes. I mean, they are the heart of Buddhist Madhya Pradesh. You cannot understand Sanchi without understanding the entire complex of these various different monasteries and what they meant. Some of them are just lying in utter and complete neglect because they are so far away from today's roads and villages and towns that nobody goes there, which is in some ways a nice thing, ma'am, because it means that you won't find beer bottles and rubbish and plastic bottles and lace packets. But at the same time, that heritage is just lying completely neglected and unloved. And that needs to change. So I was just telling Shivam when he met me the last time that the Bilsa Topes need to be completely revised. We need to go back, we need to see what is on the ground. If necessary, we need to be critical of the conservation efforts or lack thereof. But we need to look at all this systematically and come out with a proper documentation. Just because, Cunningham did what he did and took most of the antiquities sadly from inside, the caskets are all lying with the British Museum. Why have we never asked for them back? I mean, Mughal casket, Sariputra's casket, they are all lying in the British Museum. I mean, any other country would have been screaming blue murder. But we seem to be quite docile about the whole thing.
But at least work has been started. It's a good part.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, ma'am. Work has been started and it's very good to see the kind of efforts that the Department of Archaeology and Museums has been doing. And we all have been bootstrapping the entire movement, which has been a little somnolent in the near past.
Right.
I'll try and be kind in my words to your predecessors.
Yeah, so two more final questions. The first one is, it is a very interesting question. I don't know why I'm not able to stop myself to ask this. The first thing is is there any relation of Samudragupta and Veena River and the Veenadhari coin?
I don't know. I'll be very blunt. I don't know. I don't have enough work in that field to talk about it. So I will not put my 2 bits in over there. But I'll tell you this, Shivam. One of the things we do not realize when we look at the art of the Guptas in Madhya Pradesh is we do not understand the impact of the Vakatakas.
Exactly.
And if you go to the Vakataka region and you see the beautiful Vakataka temple at Ramtek, which has been, which is completely plastered over by the Bhosle dynasty, and which was then cleaned, okay, by A.P. Janhavi when he took over the State Department of Archaeology and Museums in Maharashtra. And much to everybody's shock, it was the beautiful square flat roof temple of the Gupta Vakataka period with classic Vakataka door jambs. So, we need to start looking at Gupta Vakataka together. We need to start looking at how the Guptas influenced the Vakatakas and how the Vakataka artisans influenced the Guptas. Because you must remember that there was a lot more Vakataka stone cutting going on than there was Gupta stone masonry. So there's definitely influences going both ways and swinging both ways. And we need to look at this as a much larger region also. So the fact that, when you look at the script, for example, I find that very fascinating. I see the evolution of the script during the Gupta era, and we have some beautiful Gupta era inscriptions in Madhya Pradesh, and we have the classic Gupta Brahmi, as we call it. But when we go down south into the Vakataka country, we get a completely different Brahmi. So logically, Prabhavati Gupta should have influenced the Vakatakas. But the Vakatakas had their own identity and their own idiom in the box-headed Brahmi. And most people who study Brahmi have no clue that it even exists. So the box-headed Brahmi is itself a very, very elaborate script. So yes, we need to start looking at that also. We need to start looking at the inscriptions of the Guptas on their coinage and the inscription of Guptas on stone. Do we see an evolution of the Gupta script, or is the Gupta script static during the Gupta period? The Gupta period sees an enormous number of beautiful terracotta ceilings and seals. What happens to the script over there? What is the evolution? Because the Guptas are that middle period between Ashokan Brahmi and what ultimately becomes Nagri. So when we're looking at that, that itself is something that Madhya Pradesh needs to start researching. Madhya Pradesh needs to start asking these questions about what kind of position does it hold between the north and the south and the east, and how is it playing the role of being a central agency?
Exactly, sir. And I'm happy to share that our department has started a number of projects, a number of research works to explore more about what you can say the history, the heritage, the archaeology of Madhya Pradesh. And I feel happy that I'm a part of some of one of the work which is conducted by the Directorate. Now, since this is the very last question and it's been very insightful talk, my last question is we have a lot of students with us, and I feel this is the time where we need to promote our students rather than promoting ourselves. So, what is the your message for the student who wants to conduct their studies in Gupta art, architecture, iconography, or numismatics, and how the students can avoid saying Shankha Chakra Gada Padma as Vishnu and nothing else? How they can be more critical about their research and about their citations?
So the first thing that you got to understand is that the Shankha Chakra Gada Padma being crystallized is something that comes to us in the 9th-10th century AD onwards. Till then, there is still scope for more variation. Just look at the Vaikuntha Vishnu, for example, from the Kashmir region. And how do you reconcile the Vaikuntha Vishnu with the classic Vishnu image of the Solangi period or the Pratihara period? You can't. So there are entire periods where there are changes taking place. Ayodhya Purushas disappear at some point, where Ayodhya Purushas are so important. The rising of Prithvi between the feet of Vishnu is something that is only seen really in Kashmir. and then disappears again. So the iconography of these deities is a very, very complex iconography. When you look at the Varaha from Udayagiri, you don't see Shankha Chakra Gada Padma. In fact, many Varaha images are only two-handed. He is not Chaturbhuja. There will usually be only a disc or a Shankha or the disc and Shankha. That is it. So again, there are various complicated systems in place, and there are competing systems in place. And we need to understand this, that this is a formative era. This is an era where a lot of things are being experimented with and crystallized with, and so on and so forth. You know, Gupta period art is negotiating a labyrinth. So Ankitesh has asked this question about how did Guptas negotiate this interplay. So it is a labyrinth for the Gupta era. There is something happening here, there's something happening there, there's something happening there, there is a central authority. All of these things are continuously moving, and it is like an interdimensional play going on. The Guptas have elevated art to a more naturalistic, plastic form from a more rigid form that existed before this. They are bringing naturalism and realism into their art. But at the same time, they are making sure that the divine is being separated from the mundane. So the mundane and the divine do not look identical to each other. So when you, for example, look at Chandragupta kneeling at the feet of Varaha, he looks like a human being. He does not look like a god. So, you know, the depictions of the divine and the mundane, therefore, have very, very clear lines that are drawn. There are rules in place already. And these rules are obviously making us realize that we are going towards a centralization of iconography and things in the future, but not yet. So that's the fun of the Gupta period, that there is scope for so much more. I mean, just look at the iconography at Devgarh, for example. And it doesn't fit with the later iconography of Vishnu, does it? Narayan. How often do we see it again? So it's a very, 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 very revolutionary period, to put it in a single line.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll request Janhavi to come in front and conclude, say certain words.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Shivam. It was a truly fascinating session. We now open the session for the question answers. So we have one question from Dr. Siri Rama. How do you think this aesthetic refinement appeared in Gupta period? Some other dynasty earlier which could have been a precursor? Any mentions of sculptural guilds and their trading?
Okay, so the guild bit again is not really my forte. So I will not venture into it. There are greater people than me who have written about guilds and cultural genres like that. That said, what I must say in answer to this question is that how do I put this in a simplistic format? Yes, there were influences from before. There are influences from what we call, or what I call it, especially the so-called Shunga Empire. We know today for a matter of fact that the Shungas were a chatter-putter little state. The Shungas were nowhere near the glory of the Mauryas, because by the time Pushyamitra took over, the Mauryas were a pale shadow of what they used to be. So calling everything Shunga art, where there are such huge Satavahana influences and other influences, and the Mitra dynasty influences and things like that are taking place in central India. And at this period, the period of the so-called Shunga and Kanwa dynasties, the Kanwa dynasty only exists in the Purans. We have a lot of fermentation happening in this period of UP and MP and these regions. We have a lot of local dynasties, we have a lot of local flavors, and they're all trying to exercise themselves in various ways. So definitely all of this does have a massive impact on what becomes Gupta art. It's not going to come out of nowhere. No art comes out of nowhere. Okay, there has to be a continuation, a tradition. But the difference between the Gupta period and the period before it is that thanks to the inroads of the Kushanas and then the takeover by the Guptas, there is a centralized authority for the first time. So there is an attempt at uniformization. There is an attempt at creating a single idiom. And this is what defines a dynasty or a dynastic tradition in art. I hope that answers you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Aarti who asks, who wrote the Brahmi script?
Basically, it was a man called Brahm. So, okay, sorry about that bad joke. Who wrote the Brahmi script? So, the Brahmi script of the Gupta era was written by the artisans who carved out the various temples and things like that. They were the artisans who carved out the inscriptions too. Who created the Brahmi script? That is a very good question. We know that the Brahmi script in northern India appears to come out of nowhere during the time of Ashoka Maurya. There are 2 or 3 tantalizing inscriptions that can perhaps be predated, like the Sogara copper plate, which is missing, the Balathal Bule, and a couple of other things like that seem to point towards earlier origins. The fact is, without any doubt, that Tamil Brahmi, which is slightly different from Ashokan Brahmi, is definitely older as far as evidence is concerned. We have securely dated Tamil Brahmi coming to us from the 4th century BC and the 5th century BC. Sadly, there is not much to go by because it's just names written on pottery. So it's like you would write your name on your water bottle when you were going to school so that somebody else wouldn't take your lunchbox. It's that. So it basically says Shivams, Kurushes, Amiteshas, Janhavis. So it's giving us a lot of very interesting names from what we affectionately call the Sangama era. But it's not really giving us syntax, grammar, it's not really giving us details, which the inscriptions of Ashoka Maurya give us, which the subsequent inscriptions give us. So I don't know how many of you all know, but there is only one real Shunga inscription, which mentions the Shungas. And that is by a 6th generation descendant of Pushyamitra Shunga, and it was found in a steppe in Ayodhya. Okay, where it had been reused. So there are no Shunga inscriptions. There are inscriptions of the Shunga era, and referring to the Shungas at places like Sanchi. But there are no inscriptions by the Shungas themselves. And that should be telling, right? Because if the Shungas inherited the mantle of the Mauryas, well, the least they should have done was have inscriptions left, right, and center. But till the Kushanas come in, we don't really see monumental inscriptions happening. And then it is the monumental inscription that we see in Samudragupta's Prashasti on the Allahabad pillar. And remember, it's a Mauryan pillar with Ashoka's inscription on it, on which Samudragupta puts his Prashasti. Again, he is equating himself with Ashoka Maurya and showing a continuity between him and Ashoka Maurya. That is why his inscription, his Prashasti, is on the pillar of Ashoka Maurya.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Sahitya Singh Raghuvanshi. I want to know your point of view about the conscript Shankhalipi at various Gupta sites. From what script it was developed? Yes, and there is a follow-up question. Sir, could you please recommend me some sources to know more about Shankhalipi?
So there is an entire book on Shankhalipi, or 2 books I think, and there are a number of articles on Shankhalipi. What you've got to understand about Shankhalipi is it's found in a vast number of places. It's called the conscript, which is, well, a translation of the word Shankhalipi. We have the Dube pillar at Lalitpur in Nepal, which has a beautiful inscription. We have some from Kashmir. We have some from the Udaygiri caves. We have one in Mansar in Maharashtra, by the way, just showing you that, well, during the Gupta Vakataka axis, you see the Shankhalipi going south. Also, you have the Mundeshwari temple in Bihar and so many other sites. So the Shankhalipi letters are huge at Udaygiri. If you've seen the Udaygiri inscription, it's huge. There is also Gupta temple and the Eta district. I can't remember the name of the temple just now, which also has a Shankalipi inscription. So B.M. Mukherjee has done quite a bit of work on this. Though not, well, it's not really applicable to all Shankalipi inscriptions. You can't really break them down. Richard Salomon, who is perhaps the greatest epigraphist on Indian epigraphy who has ever lived, has definitely determined that there is some bit of Sanskrit in it, and there's Sanskrit syllables in it. But he has seriously questioned Mukherjee's hypothesis. And we know that this continues all the way to the Gujara Pratyahara period, right? There is a Shankalipi inscription that Salomon reports from Pathari. So definitely telling us that there is. So if you read Indian epigraphy, a guide to the study of inscriptions, Sanskrit, Prakrit, and other Indo-Aryan languages, which was published by OUP, Richard Salomon, Indian epigraphy, you should be able to find a PDF online also. And there's an article by his from, I think, the late 80s about the decipherment of the shell script in the Journal of American Oriental Association or Society. Okay. R.K. Sharma also did some work on this, and so have a few others. So
sir, I think two volumes book, if I am not wrong, D.C. Sarkar selected inscriptions.
Yes.
So
that includes them, but Sarkar's work is very old and
new versions or new works.
So there's a lot more work that has been done by that. So I keep telling people who want to study Indian epigraphy, buy a copy of Salomon. Salomon, Richard Salomon. His book Indian Epigraphy is a fabulous resource, especially with the different variants in the script and things like that. Every single history and archaeology library should have a copy of this book. And this man has put a lot of time and effort into understanding Indian epigraphy. It's a lifetime's work. It's a work of passion. Okay, and yes, the Ganga Yamuna icons that Karan Raghav talks about are basically your Ahichatra icons. So that is again the brick temple architecture and all of that. That is a separate argument. Maybe Shivam and Nam will get Uttar Pradesh Archaeology to come on board, and then we'll do a talk about it.
So we have another question from Ankitesh. So to what extent did Gupta artistic principles bridge ancient
that.
Yes, and we have another from Aradhya Tyagi. Respected sir, I want to ask that Gupta architecture, like early Gupta architecture, second phase and third phase. So what is your idea from which architectural style the Gupta was inspired from?
So definitely the Kushana is the immediate inspiration. No doubt about that. I mean, if you have to take it for granted when you look at them, it's coming from there. But there is a very clear differentiation between the last of the Gupta style and the first of the style of the last of the Kushana style and the first of the Gupta. So there's very clear demarcation. You can draw a line in the sand. So that is a very, very clear thing. How did James Prinsep decipher the script? He first deciphered Kurush, and then, like a very sensible man, he moved backwards for Brahmi. He figured out that Brahmi was the mother of the Indian scripts, especially the Indian scripts as we understand them today. So he moved from Devanagari to Nagari. From Nagari, he looked at the script of the Palas and the Pratyaharas, and he moved from there backwards into the Gupta, from there into the Satavahana and Kshatriya scripts, and from there into the Mauryan script. So he worked backward in a very, very sensible, very, very scientific manner.
So we have a last question from Narendra. What about Jain iconography in Gupta period?
Oh, it is a very good question, Narendra. What about it? What can we say about Jain iconography? This is a period where the Jains have not yet, according to me, I may be completely wrong. This is a period where the Jains have not yet actually thrown in their hat into the sculpture ring. There's a lot of very interesting Jain work that happens earlier. So you have Kankaritila and you have the brilliant Jain stupa with the Jain gateways that existed at Kankaritila, and we have some very interesting work done over there. There are a number of publications on Kankaritila. Look it up. Uh, just the fascinating bit that there was a Jain stupa with Jain gateways that look very much like Buddhist gateways, telling you that this gateway was not necessarily Buddhist or Jain, but probably a secular gateway concept that existed prior to this. Um and the kind of artwork that you get at Kankalitila is scary because the kind of imagery that we see, the griffins and the winged animals, the beautiful bullock carts pulled by various different species of animals, including lions, the amazing images of uh, Mahavira and Parshvanath that we get from Bengali are all telling us that there is definitely an established Jaina idiom as far as culture is concerned. What exactly happens to it in the Gupta period? There is a little bit of work on this in the 3 volume, absolutely brilliant work on Jain art and architecture by Amaranda Ghosh. And I sincerely request you to read those works by Amaranda Ghosh because most scholars of Jain art and architecture don't even know that these 3 volumes exist, and it is an absolutely crying shame. Okay, because it is perhaps the best work on Jain art and architecture from that period, and it's post-colonial and it's absolutely fantastic. Just for closing, I must say this: you need to look at some of the other images from the Gupta era. Uh, when you see the terracotta images of Ganesha, and you realize why Ganesha was originally not Vigna Harta but Vigna Karta, and you can see that in the stance on the terracottas from this period.
Thank you so much, sir. I would
So
now
we have one question of Oishi. It looks very interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the question is to what extent can one tell that the royal patronage of the Guptas promoted the concepts of Puranic Hinduism?
I don't think they did. Honestly, I don't think they did. I don't think that the Guptas did uh, specifically look at Puranic Hinduism as we understand today, because Puranic Hinduism isn't Hinduism. Hinduism, as we understand it today, is a 9th, 10th century era phenomenon thanks to that great mastermind, the Adi Shankaracharya. The incipient Hinduism of the Guptas is definitely the origin of this. But how much of a role Puranic period played is we need to line up the Puranas and date the Puranas, and you need to put them in order of date, and then you need to see how many of them actually fall within the Gupta period. So, Puranic Hinduism is an expression of a resurgent Brahmanism more than anything else, and not really Hinduism. And we use these terms Hindu very casually today. And we seem to think that the religion of the Rigveda is the same as modern Hinduism when it doesn't even mention Shiva or Vishnu. So, we need to kind of shake up Oshiki, the world, and we need to start not casually throwing words around, which we do. We do this quite a lot. We just very casually say Hindu, Vedic, later Vedic. We don't define any of this regionally, we don't define any of this chronologically, and then we get into a lot of trouble. Uh, when you look at the rise of Hindu religion in southern India, for example, It is very, very different from what you see in northern India. It is virtually like a separate religion. And then you look at it today, and it's more or less one homogenized whole. But there are multiple parts to that whole. So yeah, it's you win some, you lose some.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to request Dr. Manisha Sharma to give the concluding remarks. Ma'am, over to you, please.
Yes, Janhavi, thank you. I may be biased, but one of the best webinars or fireside chat evening. That's my mental cut. So many dimensions, Kurush, Dalal sir, and because of Shivam questions, we came to know that in these dimensions, this Gupta art and architecture and every aspect of Gupta rule has, but very in a very attractive and in a very impressive manner. Dalal sir, you have expressed so many unexpected questions also. You have done very well, especially when you explained about the material which has been used in this art and architecture and role of material and that intricacy in sculpture images. So that was a very good point. And you have dealt with golden period. Every student wants to know that why it is called golden age, and so many pros and cons, so many debates are there. So you have enlightened us really, and traits of Gupta art, which you highlighted, which I liked very much. That aesthetic part, that artistic part, that was very good. And you have dealt also about coins and this casual usage of terminology. So I recall one thing that when we were in PG classes, so at that time Das Vansh ka Itihas, slave dynasty. So I recall that how casually we use that Das Vansh ka Itihas. So in that manner, you showed concern about the casual usages of terminology, which we should avoid. And also, MP is hub of Gupta survived monuments. It's a very good feature you have highlighted. And one of the points that you have expressed very well, that depth of expression, abstract expressions are abstract, and their expression in stone. It's very important, and you have explained in a very good manner. And Shivam covered all type of questions. So it was. I hope in future Janhavi and Amitesh team will arrange and will organize with such great orator as well as a historian in our program, and will organize such more programs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vakan.
My pleasure, ma'am. Thank you very, very much for having me here. Thank you, Shivam.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.